Good evening, and right before we dive into the main story, I'll quickly mention that Dr. Robert Malone, one of the pioneers behind the mRNA technology platform, he has recently launched a new show over on Epoch TV called Fallout. And his latest episode, it deals with the future next wave of all these different mRNA vaccines. Basically, how all these different big pharma companies have these massive pipelines developing mRNA vaccines and therapeutics for seemingly everything. The flu, HIV, Lyme disease, Zika virus, cancers, and so on. There's even a pipeline developing mRNA vaccines for livestock. However, it goes without saying that that type of information, regardless of how factual and well-sourced it actually is just now really welcome here on YouTube. And so if you'd like to check out that latest episode and get a peek behind the curtain of this growing mRNA vaccine industry, well, you can check out his latest episode over on Epoch TV, our no censorship video platform. The link will be right there at the top of the description box below. I hope you check it out. And now, diving into today's main topic, over in the state of Michigan, a militia has just been created in order to defend and secure the Second Amendment. Specifically, this took place over in Holton Township, Michigan, which is located in the western part of the state, a little bit north of Grand Rapids. And the board of Holton Township passed a resolution which primarily did two things. Firstly, it declared the township to be a Second Amendment sanctuary community where unconstitutional laws controlling firearms will just not be recognized. This means in practice, quote, Holton's resolution protects the lawful purchase and possession of all firearms, including semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, semi-automatic pistols, accessories, ammunition, and body armor that are legal under existing federal law. And so these are the rights that they are securing. Secondly, this resolution created an enforcement mechanism for securing those rights in the form of a voluntary community militia whose stated purpose is to preserve the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Now, this resolution and the establishment of this township militia comes amidst the backdrop of these new red flag laws that were passed over in Michigan by the state legislature and then subsequently signed into law by the Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Specifically, last May, Governor Whitmer signed Senate Bill 83, as well as House Bills 4146, 4147, as well as 4148. Taken together, these red flag laws, they created new protocols for friends, family members, neighbors, doctors, police officers, or anyone else in the community to be able to seek a court order against someone and to have their firearms taken away. Under that new statute, quote, a law enforcement officer or other specified parties, such as mental health professionals, family members, friends, or neighbors, could request a judge to order the confiscation of all firearms from an individual whom the court finds to be a potential violent threat to himself or others. The temporary precautionary action, which may last for 1 year or more, can be initiated on the word of a single complainant. A judge is required by law to make a determination within 24 hours of receiving the complaint. Within 14 days, a hearing must be set to allow the suspect to prove that he isn't a threat to anyone and thus have his firearms returned. And then, in terms of what criteria need to be met in order for one of these extreme risk protection orders to actually be issued, here is what the final version of Senate Bill 83 reads in part, quote, the complaint must state facts that show that issuance of an extreme risk protection order is necessary because the respondent can reasonably be expected within the near future to intentionally or unintentionally seriously physically injure himself, herself, or another individual by possessing a firearm and has engaged in an act or acts or made significant threats that are substantially supportive of the expectation. Now, on the one hand, I'm sure you can imagine many different scenarios where having this type of law in the books is beneficial. For instance, if you have a neighbor who's been collecting rifles for many years without any problems, but more recently that same neighbor has been doing nothing else but telling you about his wish to commit some form of jihad on American soil in order to atone for the spilled blood of Palestinians by shooting up an American mall. In that specific scenario, well, perhaps having a mechanism to remove that person's guns might not be a bad idea. However, we here at the Epoch Times, we spoke with the Holton Township supervisor, a man named Alan Yeager, and he told us that the real worry about this law comes with how capricious it is, as well as the possibility that it presents for governments to use it for possible political targeting. Quote, an ex-girlfriend could file a complaint against a person out of spite. So could someone that disagreed with your political views. Mr. Yeager then went on to compare Michigan's red flag laws with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, otherwise known as FISA, because just like with the red flag laws, which were ostensibly created to protect American citizens, the FISA courts were likewise ostensibly created to protect national security. But the FISA courts were ultimately abused by the government to spy on the Trump campaign. Quote, The victims of the FISA court abuses were American citizens who did nothing wrong. If you think our own government wouldn't misuse the red flag law to target you, just look at what they are doing to President Trump. Now, it is worth mentioning that Holton Township is not the first municipality in the state of Michigan to push back against these laws. In fact, as of today, the local governments of half of the 83 counties in Michigan have declared themselves to be Second Amendment sanctuaries, with many Michigan sheriffs saying that they will not be enforcing the state law since they believe it's unconstitutional. However, out of all the areas which have declared themselves to be a Second Amendment sanctuary, Holton Township alone established an actual militia for that purpose. According to Mr. Yeager, most of the Republicans on the board, they felt that just passing a strongly worded resolution wasn't enough to get the point across to the state government that the rights to keep and bear arms are unalienable. And so, therefore, they took that extra step. Quote, "We took the extra step of creating a militia dedicated to protecting the Second Amendment and all of our other constitutional rights. But don't expect to see our people patrolling through our towns carrying guns. That's not what this is all about." And so naturally, that raises the obvious question. What exactly is this militia all about? Well, to start with, according to the actual resolution, joining the local militia doesn't give anyone the arbitrary authority to commit forms of violence. Here is what the relevant part of the section says. Quote, "This policy does not give any member the right to take violence into their own hands or act above the law in any way." And so in practice, according to Mr. Yeager, this militia was formed in order to protect the citizens of Holton Township who might be targeted by one of these extreme risk protection orders sometime in the future. His hope is to provide his local citizens with more of a semblance of due process when facing the prospect of having their guns seized for upwards of a year. Here's specifically what he said to us. Quote, "If you go to court, you can say, I have a right to these guns because I need them to protect myself and to protect my community. Then you can maybe have a jury of your peers or at least have a lawyer present and try to explain your case. My neighbors just don't like me, so he called on me and now I'm going to lose my guns." And so you see, he believes that forming an actual militia like this will be the best way to support the constitutionality argument in court. And that's because, of course, the Second Amendment reads as follows, quote, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." And while the U.S. Supreme Court has already determined that the Second Amendment is an individual right, it is not just a right afforded to militiamen, well, Mr. Yeager's point is that it still bolsters the constitutionality argument in court if a person had a red flag issued against him, but they're at the same time a member of an actual local government militia. Although it's unclear whether it'll actually ever get to that point, because just 4 months ago, the U.S. Supreme Court actually agreed to hear a case questioning the legality of confiscating guns from a person who hasn't yet been convicted. Quote, "A federal appeals court in a Texas case deemed the practice of confiscating firearms unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has agreed to review the issue on Monday, November 7th, but no one knows if it's to overturn the Fifth Circuit ruling or double down on it." All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce the sponsor of today's episode, Patriot Mobile, who for the past 10 years now has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And when I say only, they really are the only one. They've also been great supporters of the show, which is why partnering with them was pretty much a no-brainer. Now, Patriot Mobile, they offer dependable nationwide coverage, giving you the ability to access all 3 of the major networks. This means that you and your family, you can get the same coverage that you're accustomed to, just without funding companies that hate your values. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're essentially voting with your dollars, and you're sending the message that you support free speech, you support religious freedom, you support the sanctity of life, you support the Second Amendment, as well as our veterans and first responders. And best of all, their customer service team is based 100% here in the U.S., keeping the jobs here in America, but also making the switch super easy. You can keep your number, you can keep your phone, or if you need to, you can upgrade your phone if you so want. Just give them a call and their team will help you find the best plan and the best options for whatever you and your family need. Just head on over to patriotmobile.com/Roman or just call 972-PATRIOT. And if you use promo code ROMAN, ROMAN, you get free activation. So consider making the switch today. It's again patriotmobile.com/Roman or just call 972-PATRIOT. And so we'll just have to wait and see how this Texas case plays itself out in the U.S. Supreme Court. In the meantime, though, if you happen to live over in Holton County, here are the requirements for joining your new local militia. Quote, "The township opened the militia to all legal residents of the community. A member must be at least 18 years old and pass a federal firearms background check." Holton's militia and Second Amendment sanctuary status was passed last November, and it went into effect this last February. And actually, according to Mr. Yeager, his idea appears to be catching on. Here's in fact what he told us. Quote, On that score, we have been very successful. Ever since we passed the resolution, my phone has been ringing off the hook. We hope other communities will take a similar stand. The odd thing is, I'm not really a gun enthusiast. I just have a couple of old shotguns. I'm doing this more to protect other gun owners' rights. We are trying to uphold due process for everyone. If you'd like to read the full text of the Holton County resolution, I'll throw a link to it down in the description box below. And also, I'd love to know your thoughts on the matter. Do you agree with this unique approach to form an actual local militia to defend the Second Amendment? And also, would you want a militia to be set up in your own town as well? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave them in the comment section below. I'll be reading through them later tonight, as well as throughout the whole week. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.